the rising inequality that we've seen, and there's no denying, really has to be understood against this backdrop of a feeling that that basic ideal that of the American dream is in doubt. Now, the common view of this is that this is really driven by forces external to politics and policy, that globalization and technological change, the increased competition from China in particular in recent years, really means that middle-class workers, particularly those that David Autor says are doing routinized tasks, are going to get hammered. And there's going to be a polarization of the labor market on that basis. I want to just, in following up on what Bob said about how the middle class was built or constructed, I want to talk a little bit about how politics and policy were really at the heart of deconstructing the middle class in the face of these changes. So without denying the influence of these external forces, I think it's really important to understand just how much the way in which those forces affected Americans was driven by some of these policy shifts. And I think the most important thing to remember is what Ron pointed out, which is that we have not experienced a period of cataclysmically low economic growth. The overall economy has expanded handsomely over the 1979-2007 period, but most of the gains of that growth have gone to the upper income groups. In fact, fully 40% of the after-tax, after-government benefit gains of economic growth from the 1979 to 2007 accrued to the richest 1% of Americans. And the implication of that is that for middle-class families, income growth has been very slow. For the middle fifth, it's been 20% over that period, 21% over this period, compared with 258% for the top 1%. That 21%, moreover, is mostly due to increased work hours, right, as families have worked more hours, mostly represented by the movement of a second earner into the workforce. So families are responding to these pressures, and they are stepping up their work effort, but it's not been enough. And I think that we have to take seriously the idea that a different set of policies could have produced similar levels of economic growth more broadly distributed. Even if we don't accept that view, I don't think there's any reason to think that the social contract that the United States had, so heavily reliant on employers to provide benefits, would have to be shredded as it has been over the last generation. After all, we've seen in debates over health care and now retirement pensions, real discussions about alternatives to making employers the first line of defense for workers buffeted by the winds of economic change. And those debates have essentially featured a holding pattern where we've let employers increasingly drop benefits. Retiree benefits are a thing of the past. Defined benefit pensions that were once considered the hallmark of a good job are no longer around. And we haven't put anything reasonable in its place. And important to understand, this is not about deficits and cost, right? In many cases, we could actually spend less as a society on these benefits if they were provided through in means that allowed all citizens to obtain them rather than just those fortunate enough to get them through their workplace.